Today, here we are. Here we are today. Here we are. Here we are today. Today's a great day. All right, welcome back, guys. Today's a great day. It's a Monday, July 8th, and we're back at it again. Chapter 7. We're getting through this book. We're speeding through this book. We're making it happen. So, 7th chapter, Atomic Habits, James Clear. It's a pretty short one, so we're going to get through it. We're just going to get going. We're going to make this thing happen today. Welcome back again. Thank you for watching. And we're going to get to it because this is titled The Secret to Self-Control. The Secret to Self-Control. Well, what is this secret? So again, my name is James Rico. I'm a director, DP, writer, business owner, and I've been pursuing music video directing for the last 12 years. And I'm currently working on writing my first feature film as my new goal. So I've been trying to create systems, trying to identify myself as a writer, learning things by picking up a book and reading, bettering myself every day. And so I'm giving back to you guys to motivate you to find your own new goal, to strive for your own new success, and use this opportunity to promote positivity in the world, as there's so much negativity. And I just want and I need and I feel the urge to give back in this manner of creating positivity. So here we go. Chapter 7 summary. Again, it's called The Secret to Self-Control. The first thing he wants you to remember is the inverse law of the first law, which is behavior change. And the first law of behavior change, which was make it obvious, the inverse to that, or the opposite to that, is make it invisible. He starts the chapter crazy, honestly. Like this is when he talks about the Vietnam War and how about they believe that 15% of the soldiers that were stationed in Vietnam were heroin addicts. I was like, okay, they start this pretty intense. And they said the follow-up research on these war veterans, they found out 35% of the service members had used it while in Vietnam, and when they came back, 20% were addicted to it. So I was like, okay, where's this going? And he goes on to say, once a soldier returned to the United States, he found himself in an environment devoid of the triggers. Let's see here. Let me get this right. He says, in Vietnam, soldiers spent all day surrounded by cues triggering heroin use. It was easy to use. They were engulfed by the constant stress of war. They built friendships with fellow soldiers who also used heroin, and they were thousands of miles away from home. Once a soldier returned to the United States, though, he found himself in an environment devoid of the triggers. When the context changed, so did the habit. So they go on to say, compare the situation to a typical drug user. Someone becomes addicted at home or with friends. They go to a clinic and get clean, which is devoid of all the environmental stimuli that prompt that habit. When they return to an old neighborhood with all the previous cues that caused them to get addicted in the first place, it's no wonder that you see these numbers be opposite of the people in the Vietnam study. Typically, 90% of heroin users become re-addicted once they return home for rehab. So again, I guess I'll put it in that idea of the research of people coming from Vietnam. Less people stayed addicted to it because what they said, they found that soldiers, when they returned home, only 5% of them became re-addicted within the year and 12% relapsed after 3 years. So they were just saying that because they removed themselves from the environment, all the triggers that were happening, they got off of it. They used it, and once before they used to think that heroin was something that once you use it, you can't get off of it. This is what they believed when they first discovered it. And they then compare like this idea of people that are addicted to drugs here in the U.S. when you go to rehab or you're addicted to alcohol and you go try to get help, if you go back to the same place you were when you were addicted to it, you're going to see all these things that naturally make you want to drink and smoke again or use the drug. So he's prompting it. He's prompting the chapter by telling you an extreme version of what cues can do to you. So all these built-up things that you've had in your life, it's even if it's not regarding drugs or alcohol, any bad habits that you've created in an environment, it's going to be hard to get yourself to not have the same cues because you had created a habit around that environment. So the second thing he wants you to remember is once a habit is formed, it's unlikely to be forgotten. Let's see here. He says, the idea that a little bit of discipline would solve all the problems is deeply embedded in our culture. He says recent research, however, shows something different. When scientists analyze people who appear to have tremendous self-control, it turns out those individuals aren't all that different from those who are struggling. Instead, disciplined people are better at structuring their lives in a way that does not require heroic willpower and self-control. In other words, they spend less time in tempting situations. So he says, so yes, perseverance, grit, and willpower are essential to success, but the way to improve these qualities is not by wishing you were a more disciplined person, but by creating a more disciplined environment. A habit that has been encoded in your mind is ready to be used whenever the relevant situation arises. Once a habit has been encoded, the urge to act follows wherever the environment or cues reappear. This is one reason why behavioral techniques can backfire. If you're not careful about cues, you can cause the very behavior you want to stop. Bad habits are catalytic. The process feeds itself. They foster the feelings they try to numb. You feel bad, so you eat junk food. Because you eat junk food, you feel bad. Watching television makes you feel sluggish, so you watch more television because you don't have the energy to do anything else. The third thing that he talks about is people with high self-control tend to spend less time in tempting situations, and it's easier to avoid temptation than resist it. I mentioned that already, so I guess I read that note. So again, people with high self-control tend to spend less time in tempting situations because it's easier to avoid temptation than resist it. So they just remove themselves from the triggering environments. He says one of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. He says researchers refer to this phenomenon as cue-induced wanting. An external trigger causes a compulsion, craving to repeat a bad habit. Yo, what's up, Randall? Welcome back, sir. Once you notice something you want, you begin to want it. Here's the punchline. You can break a habit, but you're unlikely to forget it. Once the mental grooves of habit have been carved into your brain, they are nearly impossible to remove entirely. So think about any bad habit you have right now, and you're trying to break it. He's just mentioning that it's more likely you'll never forget it, but there are ways to get yourself to stop doing it, but it will always be there. He says, even if they go unused for quite a while, and that means that simply resisting temptation is an ineffective strategy. So it's like, he says, it's hard to maintain a Zen attitude in a life filled with interruptions. It's hard to maintain a Zen attitude in a life filled with interruptions. It takes too much energy. In the short run, you could choose to overpower temptation. In the long run, we become a product of the environment that we live in. To put it bluntly, I have never seen someone consistently stick to positive habits in a negative environment. Which is his last point. Self-control is a short-term strategy, not a long-term. Self-control is a short-term strategy, not a long-term one. One of the most practical ways to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure to the cue that causes it. For example, if you can't seem to get any work done, leave your phone in another room for a few hours. If you're wasting too much time watching television, move the television out of the bedroom. If you're spending too much money on electronics, quit reading reviews of the latest tech gear. If you're continually feeling like you're not enough, stop following social media accounts that trigger jealousy and envy. You may be able to resist temptation once or twice, but it's unlikely you can muster the willpower to override your desires every time. Instead of summoning a new dose of willpower, whenever you want to do the right thing, your energy would be better spent optimizing your environment. This is the secret to self-control. Make the cues of your good habits obvious and the cues of your bad habits invisible. Okay, we are at 10 minutes. I didn't even set a timer. I'm getting it here now. I'm getting it out. So I'm going to spend the next 4-5 minutes kind of letting you know how I've used some of these things in these last chapters today. Last week I started to make, so I'll take a step back when he starts to talk about the identity. When he first started talking about identity, it immediately made me think, okay, I need to identify myself as a writer because I am a writer. Before I was saying things like I'm writing or I'm trying to write my first feature film in the middle of writing my first feature film. So instead of saying I'm a writer, I'm subconsciously not identifying with it, right? Which, I'm going to put this right here so you can hear me clearly. I'm consciously not identifying with it, which then drives the wrong feelings and attitudes and habits towards that, right? If I don't claim to be a writer, then I'm going to find reasons in the middle of the day to not write or say, okay, I could do it tomorrow, right? So I said, once I read that, I started to say it, and ever since that day, this was only last week, right? And I've already been writing for the last month, right? I've already been writing. But I said, you know what? I'm doing everything I possibly can right now, meaning reading books, journaling, putting myself in research, doing everything possible to make sure that I'm achieving my goal. And these books are a part of that. So as I'm reading it, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to identify as this thing. The next thing he starts to talk about is the habit scorecard. So I literally figured out the habits that I had. I analyzed some of the bad ones that I was like, okay, these are the habits that stump me, or these are the bad habits that are keeping me from moving forward. You know, when I get stuck in my writing, I might go do something completely different and then say, and reward myself with editing a photo or doing photos and editing my content before I do my writing. Like that's not the way it should be. It should be I do my writing and then I reward myself with editing or reward myself with taking photos or doing something that's completely different that I did not schedule, right? I'm even though I'm being creative, I'm not doing what I ultimately want to do. And so I started to realize, okay, he also starts to talk about the environment that you're in. So I took that to heart. It was like, what was that, yesterday's chapter? It was yesterday's chapter. Literally yesterday's chapter. Motivation is overrated. Environment is often what matters more. So I was like, you know what? Last week I was already thinking, I started to, on Friday, I started to make my schedule for this week, right? I made my schedule for Saturday, Sunday, and I stuck to it as much as I possibly could. I was looking at that schedule. And if I didn't hit a time over the weekend, I made sure to at least figure out a way to integrate the schedule that I was making for my weekend. I wasn't really sure what was going to happen the weekend, but I knew I had some goals that I want to get done, and I gave myself a certain amount of hours. So I made my schedule for this week, right? And I knew that one of the things I had to change about my writing, because I was getting stuck, was changing my environment. Okay, he's already mentioning this stuff. It's hard to create new habits in places where you've identified old habits. So this morning, I made a conscious effort to say I'm going to the coffee shop, right? I'm just going to step out of the coffee shop and step out of my place and go write at a coffee shop. And I'm going to write for 3 to 4 hours, right? I budgeted that time, took my daughter to school, went there, and I was about to go to an old coffee shop that I had been going to, but I said, you know what, I need to find a new one. Found a new coffee shop that was down the street, went to it, sat there, ordered one drink, and I began to write. And sure enough, probably had one of the better days out of the last couple weeks in my writing. Wrote about 12 pages. And then within that, as I was driving home, because I had to stick to my schedule, because I have to edit today, I came up with more ideas and context to that writing. In those 12 pages, I'm still doubting certain things about what I came up with. And I'm referring back to things that I learned with Rick Rubin's book, the idea of the unknowing, or keep going with it until you hit a wall and change it. That's what was happening in the environment here when I was writing. I was hitting walls and not knowing how to push forward, and I had to go back and look at stuff and see where did I get tripped up at. So I kept working on it, and then as soon as I removed myself from the environment, the walls kind of broke down. I was able to push forward through it. So I'm taking to heart, and I'm doing the things that he's suggesting that I'm doing, and I'm feeling already the effects of it. Today, I told myself I'm going to leave my phone upstairs. I'm not going to mess with it. I'm going to take my messages off my computer so that I don't see messages and get triggered to say, let me respond to it. I unfollowed any accounts or blocked any accounts that I felt like were distracting to me. And so already, I'm feeling great in regards to how I'm using it. I'm going to keep continuing to push myself, and I'll give you an update on how I feel as I go through it. But great advice. The thing that I can tell, again, this idea of bad habits, this whole chapter was like a kind of feeling like it focused more on getting rid of old habits. To me, the bad habits are the things that were keeping me from moving forward, even if it was one page at a time. So this chapter, when I read it today, felt like I was already breaking a lot of the bad habits because of the older chapters. And it makes sense it makes sense that you're going to keep repeating it as soon as you see something that cues you. And I think, again, what he said earlier in the book was, until you make the unconscious conscious, you will allow it to direct your life, and you will call it fate. And that just keeps sticking with me. The idea that I can recognize my bad habits, and I'm recognizing my triggers. I already knew I had that as a bad habit, but I didn't know the triggers as much. I didn't know my cues. And so I'm paying attention to the cues that are making me feel that way. And I'm slowly eliminating them as I see them. Not every day is going to be perfect, but because I'm becoming aware of what it is, I'm controlling it. So I hope you're doing it the same way. Hope you're finding your cues and your triggers, and you're able to eliminate them. Again, I share all this in the real time, mainly so you can find how it identifies for you. I don't know how that is, but this is how it's helping me. So the use of the book and what they're saying, that's the point of reading. It's like you're supposed to put into effect the things that you're reading. You're not supposed to just read it and then talk about it. You're supposed to go do it. So great book. Until next time, thank you guys for watching. Randall, we're going to be in chapter 8 tomorrow. That was the end of the first law. There was 3 chapters on the first law. So tomorrow's chapter is going to be, tomorrow's chapter is going to be about the second law. And the very end, he at the very end of this, I guess I don't know if it would be called like a chapter or not. It was like 3 chapters in one, like talking about the law. I don't know what you would call that. But at the end, he kind of reviews it again. So again, the first law, so I'll do that before I end this. The first law was make it obvious. So he gave you the options of filling out your habit scorecard. He said, use the implementation intentions. I will whatever behavior at this time and this location. He also says to use the habit stacking, which is after I do this habit, I will do this habit. And then he says, design your environment, make the cues of good habits obvious and visible. And again, to break a bad habit, you reduce exposure, remove the cues of your bad habits from your environment. So I wrote down all the ones that I did. I said, place a book at the laptop in the kitchen before. This is an environmental change, right? I said, place a book and laptop in the kitchen before bed. Have a coffee ready to make before bed. Have pre-workout in my workout clothes in front of my door. And then in the morning, I said, I will pray at 6 a.m. in the kitchen. I will read one chapter at 6:45 in the kitchen. I will write for 30 minutes in the kitchen at 7 a.m. After I work out, I will clean the house for 1 hour and then cook dinner. So those 4 things to me are important because I feel like the praying and the reading is what makes my days makes my days contain full energy. It makes me start the day off with like already have done something positive for myself. The writing for 30 minutes, I don't care if I did that this morning. I don't care if I write anything. It's just the fact that I'm reminding myself that this is important to me, even if I write very little, So it's just begin the habit before I actually have to do anything else. And the cleaning the house is important because it's important to stay clean for myself and my wife. And cooking dinner is more for my health, making sure I'm not eating out. I put for the bad habits, remove messages on the computer when working, put phones upstairs, remove junk food, and reduce cheese in meals. Cheese is my enemy. Cheese is my enemy. Randall, you said bet bro here following along. Okay, yeah. So tomorrow chapter begins the chapters of make it attractive. So we shall see. We're gonna make our habits, our new habits attractive. So let's do it. Appreciate it again. Until next time, peace.